Yeah, boy.
Welcome everyone to episode number 6 of my All Tanks 0 to Keystone Hero challenge. I have some good news. Compared to last week, I had a few more days to get some dungeon runs in, which has resulted in me being able to not only push quite a bit on my Death Knight, but also in getting some more alt runs in for the week. In fact, it's got to the point where I couldn't realistically put it all in one video because it would just be way too long in terms of runtime. So, what does this mean? It means that this episode will focus on what I've been up to with the alts, and later this week, hopefully during or right after the weekend, I will upload a video focusing purely on the Death Knight. Now, with the scene set, let's look at the monk. So my monk was blessed with another freehold +9, which I wasn't really feeling like doing, because it wouldn't result in any meaningful score increase. So I looked for a key in the group finder and ended up joining an Eltharian's Lair +9, with the idea of timing it for score, but also so I could change my key at the end of the run. Also, quick note, look at this weak aura, isn't it incredibly obnoxious and annoying? Yes, good. Hopefully I'll never forget from now on. Anyway, the run. First area goes fine, but the first boss had an iffy moment. There was still an ad alive when Shatter went off, and the whole party suffered for it. It looked quite bad, but the healer did manage to pull through, and we stabilized from there. The rest of the boss fight went without any kind of issue. A quick thing I want to note, Touch of Death feels really nice when you're fighting a pack where there's a priority mob, or a mob that's just significantly more dangerous than the others. Me being able to just say nope to the Hulk here is awesome, especially since it only got one set of its abilities off. Also, I don't know what happened to my brain once the boss was engaged here. I just didn't press any of my major offensive abilities. I don't know why. The boss is quite low when he goes into his intermission phase, and that's when I decided to press Tiger Statue for some reason. Also, I used my exploding keg on the idol of the intermission. I must have just woken up because this is atrocious. Also, quick rewind, the Evoker's death here is actually kind of hilarious. They just get ping-ponged around by the hands. It looks so derpy. We don't get a second intermission phase, so we can move on. In fact, we make solid progress here. The next bit of trash, as well as the third boss, are kind of a breeze. So only the last area of the dungeon stands between us and some score, as well as a new key. The first back goes well. I managed to stun the Charge King cast, and no one dies to any avalanche shenanigans. Clearing the boss room goes well too. So it's just the last boss that's standing in our way. What could possibly go wrong? Well, let me tell you. The ad is spawned, and it seems the team didn't quite get the memo, because it goes on a bit of a stroll, which kills the priest. Then the healer seems to be unaware that you have to hide in the second phase, and just takes the AoE damage like a champ. Naturally, this leads to a reset. This time, we start the fight in a way better way. Ad poses no problems, and the intermission goes fine too. But then, the second ad appears, and focuses on the healer, who's standing on the complete opposite end of the battlefield. So when I said the ad went on a stroll the first time, yeah, he's running a marathon right now. Needless to say, we wipe again. Third time's the charm? Maybe? Well, yeah, actually, this time we play the boss perfectly. Ads get stunned, no one dies, and life is good. Or is it? I talked to the NPC to change my +9 freehold, and it turns into a +9 Eltharian's Lair. Never change, WoW, never change. Oh my god. After this, I was rather frustrated because, well, I wanted another key than the two I already have for Tyrannical Week. So I logged on another alt. Let's check in with the Paladin. I was given a +13 Uldaman, so that's what we're doing. Pugs often prefer doing the second boss first on Tyrannical because it's significantly harder than the first boss, and using Lust here feels like more value, if that makes sense. The boss fight goes well, and we get through it without losing anyone. First boss doesn't pose any problem either, so onwards we go. We get to the Custodian pool and manage, well, I feel like Paladin just has a lot of buttons they can press to stay in the fight for a longer time, Divine Shield being the main one, to be honest. And then the third boss is next on the list. Similar to the rest of the dungeon, the third boss also goes down rather easily. Shout out to the other Paladin though for suddenly, randomly running across the ocean to Kalimdor to drop his swirly there. I don't know why. Yeah, that happened. Anyway, the trash between us and Emberon goes well, and the fight with Emberon starts out perfectly fine as well. In the first intermission though, the hunter gets separated from us, and the priest misjudges how fast a bee moves, so they get nuked when trying to cast a spell. Hunter meanwhile is doing whatever they can to keep themselves alive solo. We B-res the priest and deal with the rest of the fight quickly. Then we make our way to the last boss without any delay. In fact, the toughest enemy was this bench and the jump towards the upper section. It's kind of embarrassing. I blame being a dwarf on that one, honestly. I never have this issue, but it looks so stupid. Anyway, last boss gets dealt with swiftly, and we missed the +3 timer with less than a minute. So the pace was really solid. I get a tank trinket as loot, which honestly I'm only equipping to bump up the item level. The effect is but it's a stamina trinket. We don't like those. We actually do not. In fact, you want to switch to your DPS loot spec because the DPS trinkets are often just way better than whatever you're gonna get as a tank. If I can replace this with something better, I absolutely will. Now, my key turned into a +15 Vortex Pinnacle, and that's where we're going next. This run was overall very, very smooth. It's clear that my Paladin can handle 15 keys and above, so I hope I get to do more keys on him soon. In fact, let's talk about Paladin for a little bit. There's a few things I actually don't like about prop pile at all. First off, the reliance on consecration and how crucial it is to your kit. Playing around ground effects, especially when they're not that big in size, feels incredibly bad as a tank because repositioning, kiting, chain pulling, and mechanics make it so you move around a ton. Spending all those extra globals reapplying your consecration just does not feel good. Secondly, Paladin's lack of mobility. 2 charges of Horsey is quite literally all there is to it, and it costs 2 talent points as well. Small shout out to Blessing of Freedom because it obviously removes movement impairing effects, and it can also be improved with another talent to increase movement speed by 30%, but it's generally not taken in M+. Also, that's 4 talent points that go into 2 buttons, which leads to a maximum of 3 charges at any time for movement. Compare that to Druid Cat Form plus Dash plus Roar plus Wild Charge plus multiple option movement speed increasing talents, plus the fact that druids for some reason can go travel form in some dungeons while other people can't mount, for example. Quite a big difference, right? And thirdly, Protpal's AoE button. I don't like Blessed Hammer because it doesn't really feel impactful at all. Plus it's technically not really a ground effect like Consecration, but in practice it kind of is. Since you press it and it spirals outward, if you then move or if the mobs move, it's just a sad feeling overall. I'd much prefer an instant 360 AoE kind of thing like Thrash or Thunderclap, or if we want to compare it to some resource spenders, a cone like Raise, Revenge and Soul Cleave also feel much better in my opinion. Now don't get me wrong though, there's tons of things to like about Protpal. The defensives you have feel good to use, and the sheer amount of utility you have is insane. Just wish the way you dealt damage didn't feel a bit off, if that makes sense. Anyway, let's get back to the run. The only death we had in this run is on the second boss, when the shaman seems to go up a bit too early and then gets clipped by the big wave, which ends up killing him. He instantly uses reincarnation though, so aside from the 5 seconds penalty, there was no impact. Pulls after are also easy to deal with, and the last boss is kind of a meme, to be honest. There was a moment where I genuinely thought the shaman would die, but he actually made it in the triangle just in time. The boss's cast was done, but he made it in right before the boss teleported. I have never seen that before, to be honest. Boss dies though, and we very comfortably +2 the key. We were just under a minute too slow to get a +3, in fact. It's clear that I can take this guy into some higher keys next week. I didn't do anything else on the Paladin, so let's check in with the DH. So my DH is in the awkward spot my DK was in earlier. I have a nice key to use, but my score is just too low to attract people to join my group. So I applied for other people's keys instead, and found myself in a +12 Vortex Pinnacle. Unlike the Paladin, you immediately notice how DH's mobility makes life quite a bit easier. Getting out of these circles isn't really a hassle in comparison. The first part of this dungeon doesn't pose a problem. The mobs were just kind of annoying, but it is what it is. The first boss is where I honestly got hit by these balls way too often. I wasn't really paying attention, to be honest, but the key is just too low for it to matter. This is not the case for our enhanced shaman though. At one point they take one to the face twice in quick succession, and then they try to run out of it, but actually they run along with the ball, taking damage a third time, which kills them. They use reincarnation, which given the boss's HP was not the right call, but it's a 12, so who really cares? After first boss, we get to the dragon, and the Shami bravely takes a frontal to the face. Their HP wasn't too happy about it though. We res once the dragon is dead and go onwards. Now, it genuinely gets funny though. On the second boss, one of the main mechanics is the circle that will expand outward, and to avoid getting hit by it, you want to use these updrafts, which will launch you upwards, so the circle just passes by underneath you. Our Shami just stands in the updraft, bouncing up and down the entire time. And then when the dragon does its breath, they're midair, so they can't do anything about it and die. They get B-resed and wisely don't take it until the circle as well as the next breath are done. Then after a while they just do it again. Just happily bouncing around. I've never seen this before. And I love it. Now, right at the end of the fight, there's another circle, and they just don't avoid it at all this time and take the full damage, which results in another death. Then the Paladin starts getting involved, questioning the Shami's deaths. In fairness, I only saw what they died from by rewatching the recording. I wasn't aware of it during the run, but I find that asking these questions mid-run is probably not the best thing to focus on. You're still in a timed instance, and you'd still have plenty of time after the key to have a chat. After the next pool, I decide to try and avoid a potential negative interaction by just saying, all good, we're vibing, to which the Paladin responds, just strange deaths, you know, which, in fairness, after rewatching the recording, yes, he's quite correct. He follows up with, I main enhance, so it's strange to see, which I definitely understand, but questioning things mid-run is very rarely the answer, in my opinion. Even if the Paladin didn't mean it in a confrontational or hostile way, it might come across as such for the person being questioned, and that's probably not gonna do much good for their confidence for the rest of the run. Speaking of which, in this next pool, the Shami is the one targeted by the Lightning Lash, which, yeah. The rest of the pools to the final boss go well though, and we're obviously still very good on time. In fact, the last boss goes really well. No deaths, no one messed up. The Shaman also stood in the triangle every time, so that's awesome. Now, the Shaman never replied to the Paladin during the run until right at the end saying, yeah, I'll work on that, sorry. Which is a solid response to try and diffuse things, right? Right as I'm about to leave the party, the Paladin says, you new to enhance? Can help if you wanted, which is honestly the most positive way this interaction could have headed towards, so that's a relief. That said, the Shami was already out of the party by the time the Paladin typed it out, so yeah. Regardless though, glad it didn't devolve into a shouting match of sorts. Now, next up, I decided to just queue my own key again, because I felt like I could do higher keys than this. So we're hopping into an Alderman 15. Things start out perfectly fine. First silly oopsie is when I pull this pack with the intent of bringing it to the first boss for efficiency's sake, but even though I just tagged it once and started running to the boss room, I guess that's not clear enough of a sign for people to realize I don't want to fight this on its own. Shaman pays for it with their life, and we ended up doing the pull on its own anyway. I guess I should have communicated this right before the run started, but I felt like my intent was pretty clear here. I don't know. Let me know if I'm wrong. Now the first boss goes perfectly fine, and clearing trash towards the second boss is clean too. The second boss itself felt kind of weird though. We never hopelessly fell behind on ad spawns, but it was pretty hectic all the way through. People also weren't really using their kicks all too often. I try to, but I have to run around to grab aggro at the same time, so it gets kind of hectic and overwhelming. Nevertheless, we do get through this pull and don't lose anyone. Then the custodian pull, which is made even more annoying because the other custodian type was pulled as well, so I had cleaves to worry about too. This is where DH shines though. The mobility you have is just amazing. You can just leap away to safety pretty much on demand. You also have an AoE stun if necessary. The third boss starts out fine, but then the Shaman is at half health because of the dot ticking and gets nuked by the big AoE that followed. We don't have a battle res in this team composition, so it's kind of up to the Shami to use reincarnation if they want to rejoin the fight. They do, eventually, after waiting like 40 seconds for some reason, which felt a bit weird, but we do get through the rest of the fight without issue. The trash in between the third and the fourth boss go fine, and we find ourselves an Emberon. We get him to half HP before the first intermission, and this time the group isn't split, and we're just happily picking off the ads one by one. Then we get through the rest of the fight without a second intermission and without any deaths as well. Trash after Emberon can be horrible, but also really fun in my opinion. It all depends on how good the group is with kicks and stops. You can pull pretty big here consistently, and big pulls are fun pulls. We get through it all without issue and find ourselves in front of the last boss. Now this boss requires some thinking, kind of. Everyone gets periodically targeted divided by an orb that turns into a circle, and said circle will keep expanding, essentially shrinking the room and reducing the amount of space you've got to work with. As a group, you can be smart about it or not. Usually you want to run the boss around the room along the walls as a tank, while the rest is behind the boss, dropping the circles very close together to maximize the time you have before the room gets too chaotic. This group just kind of ran around in whatever way they felt like, which made it quite hectic. Luckily, we're a ranged composition though, so as long as everyone else had space to stand in still, we'd be fine. And we do actually kill the boss first try with no deaths and comfortably plus through the key. That's it for the DH. Let's catch up with the last alt, the one I played the most, the warrior. So the first run I did with my warrior this week was a Breckenhide plus 12. Now, I'm gonna be real, nothing really happens in this run. We just kind of W key through it. 0 deaths, less than a minute off from a plus 3. It's a true key too low kind of situation. There's not much we can really learn from this run, to be honest. Which is a very good sign, because I'd love to get my own personal key a bit higher for the next week onward. So if I can upgrade it more, that'd be great. Speaking of which, my key turned into a freehold 14, so let's check that one out instead. The first area and first boss didn't give us any problems, and we make really solid pace from the get-go. The first thing I want to highlight is how easy it is to get this pulled together on a warrior. Leap into the first pack, thunderclap for aggro, charge the 2 mobs on the right, shield slam the neutral mob after the charge into the last pack because charge has 2 charges, thunderclap for aggro, and then avatar into shield charge into the entire pack. Easy peasy. Also, look at that damage. Holy wow. Whew. Jesus. We have an oopsie a few pulls after though. This double pull has 2 brine scales and they cast Frost Blast, which is a big AoE hit, and none of us did anything to stop the cast. I was kinda cock-blocked by storming, but should have still been able to either stun with Stormbolt or stop it with Intimidating Shout. As you can see, I instinctively try and press Shockwave, but it's still on cooldown, and my brain was a bit too slow to register this, and I didn't switch to an alternative button soon enough, which costs us our healer's life. They get battle rest. The pool looks a bit rough for a bit, but we do actually stabilize. Second boss starts out fine, but then our healer is kind of the unluckiest person in the world. They want to move out of the big circle, but storming stops them from doing so. They take big damage and get knocked back, and then immediately after, Eudora uses powder shot on the monk, killing them. We don't have a battle rest, so we need to commit to the fight. The warrior is trapped in a barrel right when Eudora jumps and does the big conal sweep AoE kind of thing, which the warrior can't avoid. The dot then kills them right when they're out of the barrel. Eudora does die soon after though, so it's just Raoul we have to worry about now. Since there's no party-wide AoE anymore, our health is stable. We finish off Raoul and the dead can instantly release because the new spawn point is right here. Fast forward a few pulls and our poor monk gets targeted by blind rage, so they have to quickly run back after dying. Ring of Booty goes fine, so we're almost done here. The first pull in the last area claims the monk's life one more time due to a C-spout, but we're still fine and we don't wipe. The last boss doesn't give us any problems and it's a comfortable +2 key. No loot, but a good chunk of score and a nicely upgraded key. A Halls of Infusion 16, our next destination. This is probably the fastest Halls run I've done since I've started this challenge so far. The mage dies here because of aggro actually, the Ravager melees them and the Containment Bean finishes it off. On the first boss, the Paladin doesn't get out of the circle in time and gets one shot. The rest of the fight goes fine though. Our play is clean all the way until the third boss, where the healer doesn't move away from the frontal in time. They get battle res immediately though and make it so the party doesn't slowly bleed out, except for the mage right at the very end of the fight, so that's a quick res. Then the mage takes a wave to the face here and the pull looks a bit sketch initially, but we do manage to get through it. Then the mini boss lines up their big AoE hit with the wave, going for a double combo on the mage once again. Then the boss fight. The healer gets clipped by the swirly at the start of the fight, but gets B-resed pretty much immediately. We go into the intermission and something I've never seen before here, a floating warlock gateway. Then right at the end of the boss fight, something happens that I don't quite agree with. So the boss hits whoever has aggro, obviously, but if the person that has aggro is out of the boss's melee range, they'll target someone who is. Swirlies spawn in an awkward spot for me, and I tried to walk away / backwards a bit to the only spot I can still go to, but apparently this is not in melee range anymore. This happens twice and kills the Paladin as well as the monk, and I don't know, man. I took like one step back, sure, but this still looks like melee range to me. In fact, if you look at my action bars, none of the numbers, except for the one on heroic throw, obviously, turn red, which would signify I'm either not in range or out of range. So the boss was never out of range for me, but I was apparently out of range for him. Anyway, we comfortably time the key still, and I get loot. A very solid helmet upgrade. Thank you very much. I will gladly take it. My key turned into a +18 Underrot, and that is where we're headed next. Now, Underrot has proven to be a difficult key in the beginning stages of this challenge. Remember when I did an Althera 17 on the DK with the epic music and intense voiceover and stuff? Yeah, that won't be necessary here, because this key felt like doing a weekly 20 with the boys on the mains, if you know what I'm saying, honestly. In fact, we were so fast, our lust wasn't up for another 5 minutes by the time we got to Cragmaw. So we did the third boss first, and obviously the trash in front of him as well, and then looped back to Cragmaw. Cragmaw himself didn't pose a challenge either, just clean play and only the last area to deal with. Now, because we can't have nice things, this run isn't deathless. The other warrior runs through some tentacles here and dies right at the last pool. I get feared as well, but the pool doesn't go south. One res later, we do the final boss. The warrior died earlier due to a small and silly mistake on the tentacles, but this time they get killed because of a sudden white swirly that spawns under the boss on the entire party. I'm guessing this is, like the warrior says, an invisible spore, which is obviously a bug, which sucks. I don't know why the DK didn't immediately B-res though. We have 3 charges and the fight's nearing its end. He eventually did though, and we get through the fight fine, comfortably timing and even +2ing this 18. My key turned into a 20 Brackenhide, but this is as far as my warrior got this week. Which brings us to the weekly vaults. My mom got some pants. Pants on the hero track to replace the ones I had on the veteran track, so a very nice upgrade for sure. This brings me to item level 417.5, and it's great that even the monk still sees item level gains despite being played the least overall so far. Now, did my key perform the ultimate troll by once again turning into a freehold 9? No, luckily not. I'm given a +9 Alderman so I can rest easily. After turning the new pants into tier, the monk is now sitting on 3 tier pieces, so only 1 more to go. The Paladin was presented with a shoulder piece. Again, it's a small upgrade compared to the ones I'm currently wearing. They're both on the hero track, so when fully upgraded they'd be the exact same item level, but I want to use all of my aspect crests I get for crafting gear, so I take the shoulders still. This brings my item level to 423.88. My key on the Paladin is a +15 freehold. My DH is unlucky with their vault though. It's a cape on the same item level, but the one I have now has avoidance on it too, so I have to take the tokens for the first time instead. My item level after this week sits at 419.69. My key is a Vortex Pinnacle 15. And then the warrior. I got 2 vault slots, a ring on the myth track and a chest piece on the hero track. The ring is obviously a huge upgrade, but my current rings are crafted rings, and since I'm in the key range now where I'll get aspect crests, upgrading these rings is definitely in the cards soon. Because of this, I go for the chest piece instead to solidify a hero tier piece. Eye level now sits at 424.25, and my key is a +18 Brackenhide Hollow. And there we have it, a very elaborate update on my alts this week. It turned out to be more than expected, hence the DK getting his own video later. It's been awesome seeing the alts progress a bit, and since the DK is nearing the end of its journey, that will obviously give me more time to focus on these guys later on as well. Now, let's wrap things up. Thank you guys for watching, subscribe and like if you enjoyed, and see you in the next episode. With that, I'm out. Cheers.